I know, I'm here.
You're here. And you're in your living room.
Difficulties, but we're back. We're here.
It's all good. I like your autumnal color palette too. Really
Thank
nice.
you. I'm feeling it. Yeah.
I'm feeling it too. So everybody, thank you for joining us for doing branding right for interior designers. We would like to thank Foyr, first of all, for inviting us to share our experiences in capital B branding. And who better to have a coffee talk with than my dear friend and colleague, capital B, Brett Helsham. Brett is an incredibly talented interior designer who somehow, I don't know how you do it, she balances this wonderful juxtaposition of calm classics and effortless cool, like super cool. No, seriously. Her portfolio spans residential, hospitality, retail, commercial design. She does everything. She's very nimble in these spaces. Brett has a BFA from NYU, and on top of that, an MFA from interior design, in interior design from the New York School of Interior Design. And on top of all that, super mom, right? We're both super moms, right?
Yeah.
And a lovely human. I've really admired Brett, how she has grown her business and brand in a short period of time. And I think she's a great example of how interior designers are doing branding right now. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you. That's such a lovely introduction. I have a question for you before we start. Are you actually wearing pants? Are you wearing pajamas?
Nah, jeans.
You know, this whole Zoom thing, people like you don't know. You're like party from the top up and you don't know what's happening from the top down. So you're very
like together. The top game, because that's all that matters right now. It cuts down on the wardrobe budget, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Sarah, I've known you for a few years now. My turn to introduce you. And of course, you're an incredible person, but also an artist. I know that what began as sort of a daily creative exercise in healing ultimately evolved into collection after collection after collection of these amazing surface designs, which you can sort of see behind you, that are in gouache, right? And so that, I think, organically evolved into your eponymous brand of wall coverings and fabrics that you started in 2019. But I don't think I would classify you as like an overnight artist, right? Like you've always been an artist. You studied graphic design at RISD, and you've actually been the creative director of your own design consultancy agency, right? That you founded in 2003. So it's not really a question in my mind that you were able to organically go from artist to, really fixed person in the interior design world, that you garner attention from not only designers, but publications, and that's internationally. So that's really amazing. And in this sort of short span of time, you have exclusive contracts with CB2, which is amazing. And you've been already featured in countless publications like Arc Digest and ID Mag. So
blush. You're making me blush.
I mean, you're amazing. I mean, with all sorts of people, you're a dream to work with and collaborate with. And so I'm just really glad to call you my friend. So let's just get this party started. Let's talk about branding.
Let's dive into it. So I feel like we have a lot to cover in a short period of time. So we're going to try to present to everyone some really solid takeaways and kind of connect them to our experiences in our various industries. But as I said, like Brett has a really great brand to use as a case study, and it encompasses so much more. When you think branding, it's like, oh, okay, so the logo and the website, but it's so much more than that. And I think that you have a very successful execution of the look and feel across all of your various communications, but also the tone of voice in what you put out there between writing and video. And there's this consistency as to how you present yourself and your business that is really successful, but also super, super authentic. So I think that what might be helpful, I would like to learn a little bit more, and I think that our group here would be interested is, what does branding mean to you, and how did you get started in building your brand?
Totally. So I think I mean, just to start off with the basics, like what is branding? And that's really what the perception of what people or clients or prospective clients actually think about when they think about your business, right? So it's not just these pretty appealing visuals, so to speak. It's also about your voice, the way you build relationships with your clients and within your network. And eventually it's that promise, right? That what a client can expect should they hire you. So all of that needs to represent this true, authentic, as you said, you. That also includes like your deepest passions. It's not just about like the work, it encompasses you. So I guess, what does that mean? I break that down into 3 steps. So any of you that want to grab a pencil and paper, this would be the time. So we can dive into that. So number 1, I ask myself, who am I? And like, what the hell am I serving? Or what am I doing, right? Like what is my brand? Because you have to define it. Otherwise someone else is going to do that for you, right? And you might not really like what someone else has sort of said about you. So there's a million of us designers out there. So we're trying to separate who we are from the pack, right? So identifying who you are, what your style is. Are you specialized, right? Are you strictly residential? Are you strictly commercial? Are you a mid-century designer? The more that you can sort of pinpoint that, the better. You could be someone that does it all, right? But you have to be able to answer that question. But most important, like a vision board, you really want to, for me, start to visualize who that client is, right? Is it a bachelor? Is it young families with young kids? What's their style? What's their average income? Their budget? What's their age group? The more in depth with your ideal client that you can be, the better. That's sort of your ultimate goal, really writing down what it is that you do and who you want to serve. And then like, from that, you start to define what makes you unique, right? So imagine if you're, Sarah, if you're in a small town, right? Really small town, and there's 3 designers there. The last thing you want to be compared to is price, right? Like, oh, she's the cheap girl, you know, it's like an iPhone. You buy, no one really buys the expensive one and no one buys the cheap one. Everyone stays in the middle, but you don't want to be that designer. You really want to not be like the Walmart of designers, even though I love Walmart, but you really want to stand out. So how do you stand out from those other 3 people? Because ultimately vibe attracts your tribe, right? So
and we want to work with people that we like. Like I'm always saying this, I'm like, work with people you like. And when you are communicating who you are and have a really strong sense of your own identity, that projects to people who you are. And like people want to work with like people, right? And you want those healthy client relationships.
Yeah, you're gonna get bad apples along the way. That's a whole other talk that we can structure
another time. Yeah,
exactly. But oh God, it's like I'm getting flashbacks. But yeah, you really want to attract the people that you want to attract, and of course, not only that, like you want to attract the people that pay the way you want to get paid, and you deserve to get paid. So. That will lead us to number 2, right? Which you sort of alluded to at the beginning of what branding is, which is the visual component of it all, right? That includes logo, color, typography, your website, right? How you shoot your photographs and what you put on your website. And that should also coordinate with all your collateral materials, like marketing. What are you sending out to publication? What's your signature in your email read, right? Your business cards, your mood boards, what are you showing your clients actually in meetings? Social media posts, like every single piece.
That is music to my ears.
Oh yeah?
It is.
Right? That consistency.
Yes, like on the consulting side of branding in my career, it's like you're always drilling that into the client. You start a project and you set them up with these tools and you kind of send them out into the universe, because not every relationship is where you're doing every piece of branding for a client. And ideally, you want to set people up for success and give them the tools. But it's like, you got to use this consistently every single time. It matters. It really matters. And then it just gets watered down and your identity gets watered down and you're not memorable.
Yeah, it can get lost, right? Like every
Yeah.
piece of mail I sent, even to like paying taxes to the government, I put my logo sticker on there with, you know what I mean? Like it's just, there's even my checks have my logo on them. So you just want to read, like you said, consistent.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
that shows. And that should also read to like Facebook, right? Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, Behance, TikTok. Although if anyone out there actually knows how to use TikTok and how I can apply it, like hit me up, because like that's like the one thing I don't understand. But you know, every time you use one of these platforms, you really want to, you know, make it consistent. And because you're in a visual industry, your visual branding really needs to be top notch, right? We all start from somewhere. I didn't get into the branding at the very beginning of when I started my company, but I slowly over time hired the right people to do that, because, you know, it's a learning process with growth, and it's not my job,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think one thing that we should mention in this talk is that, you know, this can be a daunting task, and, you know, there is some flexibility, and part of branding is also that you have to allow it room to evolve. It should evolve. Our businesses change and we grow, and our brand should do that as well. Does that mean you need to start from scratch? No, but there are ways that you can make adjustments to it. And the strongest brands are really the ones that can live and breathe and become something fresh within a set of parameters and guidelines that still feel, you know, on brand. So, and
Yeah.
I think you do that beautifully.
Thank you. Actually, I think you do that beautifully too.
Thanks, love.
But I think the third part of all this, right, and I think that flows nicely into that, is that the authenticity, right, of you and your brand. Right now, I mean, the bulk of branding is right now social media, right? It's your Instagram, it's what you see on your, you know, if you're blogging, or if you're, you know, your website, right? It's your how clients first perceive you. And unfortunately, social media is how they meet you, right? And so there's two camps, I feel, within social media, using Instagram as an example, right? I don't think either is wrong or right. It's just sort of what you feel is true to your brand. Like for example, one type of person likes to have two separate accounts. I think you're like this.
I do that, yeah.
Yeah, so you have your business, and it's you show your process and stuff, and everything you do, and then you have a private, or not private, personal one, where you're going to show a little bit more of who you are and that kind of stuff, and family life. Where I am of the camp where I mix it all into one, because I feel who I am is part of my brand. Because when you hire me, you're not just hiring my skill set, but you're also hiring me as a person, right? Because as you said before, you want to work with people that you get along with, especially after, it could be a year or more that I'm working with a client. And when, you know, shit hits the fan, like and it inevitably does, you want to be able to have a comfortable dialogue with your client on both sides. And that has a lot to do with trust, and has a lot to do with respect. And a lot of that comes out of being authentic, right?
Well, and
so,
I also, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, you know, for me as a mixed Instagram account, you see my son, my challah making skills. Like, I just think that that's really important for me.
Yeah. Well, and you know, so the difference between our businesses is that you are selling a service, and there's a relationship that you are cultivating, whereas I am selling a tangible product. And yes, there are relationships that I have, but you know, this is a really good example. A number of years ago, I was working on a branding project for the New York Public Library, and we were doing environmental graphics for a children's reading room. And I had been a mom for a couple of years, and I walk in, and the project manager is showing me the space. We're doing a walkthrough, and I said, "Where's the stroller parking area?" And he looked at me and he was like, he said, "I know. The architect didn't include it, and we had to rework a whole bunch of stuff." And I thought to myself, and I think now it's like, look, like you are a parent, and there's an intimacy in the relationships that you have with your clients that you are creating their home where their families are growing up. And as a mom, do I want someone coming to my home that kind of understands what that functionality is? And like, if you live with a boy, like don't put the towel rod close to the toilet for the obvious sprinkle reason, like those kinds of things, right? And these are really personal things. You are entering someone's personal space. And I think by communicating your openness in your brand says a lot about the kinds of relationships that you are open to having with your clients.
Yeah, and does that trigger stuff, right? Like, I once posted a photo a couple years ago of me kite surfing, and this guy messaged me and was like, "Oh my God, I totally forgot that you're a kite surfer. Like, I'm actually doing an office project. Would you want to do it with me?" And that actually turned into several projects. And I hadn't talked to this guy for years prior to him reaching out, right? So there's always that connection where people are like, she's my type of person, right? Or they're my type of person. They get me. And that's half the battle, honestly. Like, there's a lot of people that can make rooms look pretty, but you got to be able to work with the other person.
Well, and even more so in this universe, I think we are all looking for those kinds of close connections, right? They're super meaningful.
And not everybody's an Instagram person, right? But you have to engage your audience no matter what. That's just, you have to establish that credibility and trust. So whether that's like posting photos or chatting directly to a camera or whatever, like you kind of have to put a little bit of yourself out there, because people understand gimmicks, right? Off the bat, they understand what works and what doesn't. And even you, right? Like I used to try and do all sorts of like story posts with like a pretty background and a font and this, but that's also not me. And I don't have the time for that. So, right? And that's just like part of me, like, so you learn what works and what doesn't for you, and that's just part of the game.
Yeah, no,
you know what I mean? It's part of the game. But I would say that's my top 3 sort of really ways to sort of break down.
Yeah.
But I think interesting, like you have an interesting perspective because you organically went from, working with clients to being your own client almost, right? Like starting your own brand. And you had to sort of apply those same rules that you give clients to yourself. I'd love to know like how you have approached your own branding.
Yeah, it's challenging to be your own client. You kind of like freeze up a little bit, and I can do this till the cows come home for other people and other businesses. And my wallpaper and textile business has evolved very organically. And I kind of joke, I was like, oh, leave it to me to, start a second business accidentally. And I'm like, oh, it just kind of happened. But, in going to my first trade show, this is where I was kind of testing the waters very subconsciously. And that's where my branding needs first started. And it's like, can I design a trade show booth and business cards and I can do all of that in my sleep. So I did that and just had like a very initial set of simple tools. But the turning point for me really, it shifted when I decided to develop my own product for wallpaper and textiles. The deliverables list for the tools that I needed and my partners needed just started growing exponentially. And this gets into like branding class, 200 or 2 or whatever the class name is, but where it's like, once you have this foundation, it's how does that, and I touched on this earlier, it's how does that language expand and evolve as your business grows and changes so that it's perceived as growth and consistently, but not something new, right? And that's a very tricky thing to achieve, is to keep things fresh and new, but still on brand. And now that I have trade representation in San Francisco at Hune, New York at La Paire, and Miami Twill and Texture. So now, like consistency in branding is even more important, because while I have a very small studio, now I have trade representatives who are communicating my brand for me. So the tools that I give them need to reflect not just my brand, but also a harmonious partnership. I'm supporting their brand and they're supporting me. And how how does my system allow for that balance? And these are new business relationships, and to your point of, every single piece it's an opportunity to communicate your brand down to the last mailing label that goes out, whether it's to the IRS or I'm sending samples over to Jeff Holt at Hune, yeah. I want things to be seamless and easy for my partners to work with me and also communicate and sell on my behalf. Yeah. So I'm wearing a lot of hats, as are you, but I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So rock on.
Yeah. It's fun. It should be fun, right? Because if it starts to get, there's two things to that. If it starts to get overwhelming, one, you got to outsource, right? Like, I don't care how good, you could be great at everything, but nobody has the time to do everything, right? Yeah. So you just have to be able to choose your time wisely, make sure you do what you do, and then hire the people when you're ready to help you shape that. And then eventually it starts to get a little bit more easy and organic. And
there's something to be said for getting those outside eyes to help you establish a foundation so that you're set and you don't have to think about as much. And you've got that toolkit to go and kind of execute those parts and pieces internally.
Totally.
So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if we were to boil it down, what would your most important brand tool you would use for your business?
Yeah, it shifts, right? Right now it's social media, hands down, because that's how we're communicating. And, I studied typography at RISD, where we painted letters with a brush and spaced letters out for optimal readability from 5 feet away to 30 feet away. So I guess my point is, like, I've really had to adapt and tool up, which is not a bad thing. It's a learning curve, but now more than ever, that's how I'm communicating. How about you?
Yeah, I'd say social media.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, I'm so bad at it, right? But unfortunately, it's the name of the game. And yes, my business, as is yours, is word of mouth, right? So part of that, what I spoke about earlier, is that, part of your authenticity and your branding and stuff like that means nothing if you have a bad reputation.
Okay.
Right? Like, you could have the coolest brand in the world, but if nobody wants to work with you, you're not going to work. So I think rolling all that into is like, you just also have to be a nice person.
Yeah. Above all, a good human.
So before we break into, I guess, questions, Q&As, like that, because the time is running out. I feel like we could talk forever.
No, you and I, we can talk. We can talk.
We should have another coffee talk.
Yeah.
Let me set that up. But why don't you give us quickly, like, your top takeaways for branding that people, you personally, and then
me personally, foundation. Be thoughtful about defining who you are first, conceptually. People can make anything pretty, but define who you are first. Consistency, totally key. Every single piece, everyone please remember what Brett said, every single piece, period. Like, whole. And I think as you have more team members using those parts and pieces of your brand toolkit, make sure everybody's on the same page. And that's for, trade vendors or internal staff. And I think the last thing is, if hiring a branding consultant is not in your wheelhouse, totally fine. But if you can, use resources, ask for help, even if it's just to establish that foundation and some core strategy with a few basic tools, it's worth the investment.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. What about you? What are your top?
I think mine are like, think about your brand as a person, make sure you like what you see, right? And then at the end of the day, it's not just what it looks like, but it really is what it feels like. Like, you get that energy from it, and when you get it, right? How do you separate yourself from others, which is super important. Like you, there's value in getting outside help. And remember, I think most importantly, you might create an amazing brand, but you have to promote it. That's just, you have to. And that at the core, branding is about reputation. So you want to have a positive reputation because you cannot grow if you don't have anything in the pipeline. So I guess with that, we can open up to questions, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah and Brett. That was phenomenal. I can't wait to apply these teachings to my own brand as well. So we have a few questions. First, we got a few questions from current students who are asking, do you think it's beneficial or necessary, like as a current student, to really establish your brand, and will that help you then get more jobs once you're out into the workforce?
I can speak to that. Yeah. Listen, I think no. I mean, yes, to know what you like, but I think as you become a professional, I always encourage people to work for other people first, learn the mistakes on someone else's dime. Don't tell them I said that. But it's true. And then when you're ready to go on your own, because there's a steep learning curve going on your own, by then, after a few years, you've kind of, because I've shifted, I was like, I'm only doing commercial, and now I love residential, and things shift and change. So I think, as you said, organically, your brand is going to come to where it needs to be, but I don't think on the onset it has to be defined.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So our next question is, this is coming from somebody who is just at the start of establishing their interior design practice. How do you convince like the first few clients to hire you when you're just at the beginning?
Besides begging?
Besides that, yes.
They're like, I will work for a bottle of wine. Yes, exactly. I will do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think always be true to yourself, right? Like, yes, I'd work for wine, but also you need to work for money. It's, it's important to be able to, it's hard getting off the bat, like, but it snowballs. Once you have one client and you get that reputation and people see that you can actually do the work, it'll snowball. It will really happen organically on its own.
Okay, amazing. That's so good to know. And we have time for one more question. And this person is asking, do you feel like mixing your personal and like business pages together like into one, is that more beneficial when providing a service? Will people resonate more with that?
I don't know. Sarah, what do you think? I mean, for me, it works for me. Like, I like it, but I also have a lot of design friends that really have their private pages private, and they might show an Instagram and do the whole talkie on their design pages, but they really don't want to show that. I think my husband would think that I should be on that camp, but I'm like, here I am at a farm and whatever. So it's really just how you feel. I don't think there's a right or wrong.
I think it's a personal choice. And also I think there is a little bit of a division between product and service. And also, when does a product become more of a personal brand? Which is kind of, I'm on the cusp of that as well. But I think it's really dependent on what people feel comfortable doing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. So we're out of time now, but I see there are some people who have more questions in the chat. Would you two feel comfortable sharing like your email or your Instagram so people can reach out and ask more questions?
Sure. Yeah.
In the chat, it's probably easier, right?
Sure. Yeah. If you're able to just type it right in the chat. Yeah, that way people can just reach out and get all their questions asked, because we have a lot of great questions, and I wish we had hours upon hours to continue the discussion.
Yeah. Am I going to regret giving my personal email, or should I give my personal?
Yeah,
whatever. How many people are asking?
Oh.
Okay. I gave my personal. Here you go.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah and Brett. That was absolutely phenomenal. And thank you to all of our attendees who came today. So now we have about a 15-minute break until our next session. So go to the bathroom, get some water, eat lunch, do what you got to do, and we will see you all back in a little while. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.